The dragon didn't blink. It hadn't blinked in hours. Not when they dragged it in. Not when the chains bit into its wings. Not when the auction lights burned white against its ruined scales. It just watched. The arena smelled of coolant, blood, and burnt metal. Overhead, holo banners flickered with bold red letters. Biological asset. Damaged, low yield. Someone in the crowd laughed. Looks half dead. Scrap meat. Won't even fetch fuel grade. The dragon's ribs showed through cracked charcoal scales. One horn had been broken clean off. Dried blood traced a dark line down its jaw. Its left eye was sealed shut by scar tissue. The right eye, though. That one moved. Slowly. Tracking. Remembering. The auctioneer stepped forward, voice amplified across the circular pit. Lot 73. Confiscated from Outer Rim skirmish zone. Non-compliant. Combat ineffective. Estimated life expectancy, less than 1 cycle. A pause. Opening bid, 3 credits. The crowd shifted, unimpressed. 3 credits wasn't an investment. It was an insult. 3 credits for sacrificial harvest, the auctioneer added. Or meat processing. Still nothing. The dragon lowered its head slightly. Not in submission. In exhaustion. Up in the upper tiers, someone called down, I wouldn't pay 1. Laughter echoed across steel. The dragon didn't react. Didn't roar. Didn't thrash. And that unsettled more people than violence would have. Because dragons, even broken ones, do not go quietly. The auctioneer sighed dramatically. 3 credits. Final call. A hand rose from the lower platform. Not from a noble box. Not from a syndicate table. From the mechanic sector. Grease-stained sleeve. Scarred knuckles. Oil beneath the fingernails. 3 credits, the man said. His voice wasn't loud. But it carried. Heads turned. Someone snorted. You serious? Hey, scrap boy, another voice mocked, planning to make boots out of it. The mechanic didn't respond. He stepped forward through the clearance gate as the transaction pinged. Name registered, Caleb Ward. Occupation, Independent Systems Mechanic. Credit balance, nearly empty. The gate clanged shut behind him. Down in the pit, the dragon finally moved its head. Slowly. Its open eye focused on the approaching human. Caleb stopped a few meters away. Up close, the damage was worse. Burn scoring along the spine. Suppressor brands along the throat. Wing membranes torn and stitched badly. They hadn't just captured it. They'd used it. The auctioneer leaned over the railing. You understand there's no warranty, right? Once you clear the pit, disposal protocols are your responsibility. Understood, Caleb replied quietly. A guard tossed him the chain controls. The dragon's neck jerked as the collar tightened automatically. A ripple of faint, suppressed power shuddered through the air. Several spectators flinched. Caleb didn't. He stepped closer. The dragon inhaled. The sound wasn't loud. But it was deep. Deep enough that something in the arena's foundation vibrated faintly. A warning. The guards raised shock pikes instinctively. Caleb lifted a hand slightly. Stand down. They hesitated. The dragon's eye narrowed, not at the guards. At him. Caleb reached the first chain. He didn't pull it. Didn't drag. He knelt. The entire arena went silent. Someone up in the stands whispered, "What's he doing?" Kneeling in front of a dragon was not standard procedure. It was not safe. It was not intelligent. Caleb placed one hand gently against the cold metal restraint at the dragon's foreleg. Up close, he could feel it. Not heat. Not weakness. Pressure. Like a storm sealed beneath stone. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only the dragon could hear. You're not scrap. The dragon's breathing changed. Subtle. But different. They broke your harness, Caleb continued softly. Overdrove your core. You're not dying. A faint tremor ran through the chains. One of the guards stepped forward nervously. Move it to processing, mechanic. Don't get sentimental. Caleb ignored him. He reached up, slowly, and placed his palm against the dragon's unscarred cheek. The scale there was warm. Warmer than it should have been for something supposedly near death. The dragon's eye widened slightly. Recognition flickered there. Not of his face. Of his posture. Kneeling. Not in dominance. Not in fear. In respect. The arena lights flickered. Once. Twice. The auctioneer frowned. Power fluctuation. Up in the control booth, Technicians scrambled over consoles. Minor grid spike, someone muttered. Down in the pit, the dragon's chest expanded. For the first time since entering the arena. It took a full breath. Caleb felt it under his hand. The core wasn't failing. It was restrained. Suppressed beyond tolerance. He glanced up at the collar control and disabled one limiter. The guards shouted immediately. "What are you doing?" "Re-engage suppression." Caleb didn't look at them. He looked at the dragon. And slowly removed the first chain from its foreleg. Metal clanged against the arena floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The dragon did not attack. It did not lash out. It simply lifted its head, higher than it had since being dragged in. The arena temperature rose by a single degree. Barely noticeable. But measurable. Someone in the stands whispered, voice suddenly thin, "That thing's not broken." Caleb stood slowly. He removed the second chain. Then the third. The guards leveled their weapons fully now. Step away from the asset. Caleb didn't step away. He stood beside it. Hands still resting against its scales. The dragon unfolded one wing slightly. Torn membrane stretched. Power hummed beneath scar tissue. The lights flickered again. This time across the entire station. The dragon's throat vibrated. Not in rage. In awakening. And when it finally opened its jaws. It did not scream. It did not spit fire. It exhaled. Low. Heavy. A sound that rolled through steel and bone alike. The beginning of a roar. And everyone in the arena understood, all at once. They had not sold scrap meat for 3 credits. They had sold something that had been waiting. And it had just been given permission to stand. The roar didn't explode. It rolled. Deep. Lead. Ancient. It pressed into the bones of the station like gravity briefly increasing. Up in the stands, laughter died instantly. Shock pikes trembled in nervous hands. The dragon's exhale faded into a low vibration that refused to disappear. Caleb didn't move. He stood beside it, one hand still resting against warm scales, feeling the change ripple through muscle and bone. This wasn't rage. It was release. Above them, the auctioneer's voice cracked through the loudspeakers. Containment breach protocol. Shock the asset. 3 guards fired simultaneously. Blue arcs snapped across the dragon's body. And vanished. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Folded. Like lightning striking a storm that swallowed it whole. The arena lights dimmed sharply. Control panels sparked. Technicians shouted over comms. Grid instability. Energy feedback spike. What is it pulling from? Caleb glanced toward the collar still around the dragon's throat. The suppressor bands glowed dull red, fighting something they could no longer contain. He stepped forward again. Another chain fell. Metal hit steel. The dragon straightened slowly, vertebra by vertebra, until it stood at its full height for the first time. Gasps rippled through the arena. It wasn't small. It wasn't broken. It had been folded inward. Its cracked scales began to shift color subtly, gray giving way to deep ember tones beneath the surface. The sealed eye twitched. A faint line of light burned beneath scar tissue. A guard whispered hoarsely, "That's not a scrap class." Another voice answered, shaking. "That's furnace lineage." Up in the control booth, the station commander forced his way forward. Confirm classification. A junior analyst swallowed hard as data streamed across his display. Reading thermal output beyond civilian buyer range. Core activity stabilizing instead of failing. Stabilizing, the commander snapped. That's impossible. It was tagged as terminal. Down in the pit, Caleb reached up and placed both hands against the dragon's collar. He spoke softly again. "They overrode your core, didn't they?" The dragon's throat vibrated faintly. "They burned you until you stopped fighting." The dragon lowered its head slightly, close enough that its massive eye filled Caleb's entire field of vision. There was intelligence there. Not animal instinct. Not feral hatred. Recognition. And something else. Waiting. Caleb found the final limiter seal. His fingers hesitated for half a second. Not from fear. From certainty. Once removed, there would be no pretending this creature was weak. He disabled it. The collar cracked down the middle. Not from force. From internal pressure. It split open and fell away. The entire arena shuddered. Heat washed outward in a controlled wave, strong enough to make spectators shield their faces. The dragon inhaled again. This time the breath was different. Complete. Its chest expanded fully, ribs no longer visible beneath tightening muscle. The ember beneath its scales flared brighter. Up in the stands, someone stammered, "That thing was powering down." Another replied in horror, "No. It was powering itself inward." The dragon unfurled one wing fully. Torn membranes knitted slowly with faint streaks of light tracing along the edges like molten veins. Energy signatures across the station spiked again. Reactor interference detected, someone yelled over the intercom. Caleb looked up sharply. "No," he muttered. He could feel it through the deck plating beneath his boots. The dragon wasn't draining the station. It was sinking with it. Ancient furnace-class dragons had been engineered centuries ago, not just as weapons, but as regulators. Living stabilizers for volatile energy systems. Someone had ripped one out of a fleet and tried to turn it into arena meat. The dragon lifted its head higher. The second eye opened. The scar tissue didn't vanish. It split. Light bled through the seam like dawn breaking through cracked stone. And then, it bowed. The movement was deliberate. Measured. Massive head lowering in front of Caleb. Not submission. Acknowledgement. The entire arena went silent. Even the guards forgot to breathe. The dragon's voice rolled out, not as a roar this time, but as something deeper. A harmonic vibration that trembled through the floor. Every screen across the arena flickered. System logs scrambled. A single line flashed repeatedly. Core link established. The station commander paled. "That's impossible," he whispered. The junior analyst shook his head slowly. "It's not attacking." "What is it doing?" The reading stabilized. Power fluctuations across the station evened out. A coolant surge in Sector 4 corrected itself automatically. The failing energy relay near the docking bays recalibrated without manual input. The dragon exhaled again. And the sound wasn't destructive. It was steady. Caleb rested his hand against its cheek once more. "You remember, don't you?" he murmured. The dragon's massive eye narrowed slightly. Not in threat. In focus. It remembered what it was built for. It remembered what it had been bonded to. It remembered kneeling figures, not in dominance, but in partnership. Up above, the commander's voice cut through the silence. "Security units, eliminate the handler. Re-engage suppression protocols." Weapons snapped back up. The dragon's head lifted slowly. The temperature in the arena rose several degrees. Not enough to burn. Enough to warn. Caleb didn't step back. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply stood. Beside it. The dragon's voice rolled through the arena one more time. Not a roar. Not yet. A promise. And in that moment, everyone watching understood something they should have remembered long ago. Dragons do not die quietly. They wait. And they remember who kneels. The first guard fired again. The bolt never reached them. It bent midair. And dissolved into sparks. The dragon did not move. It didn't need to. The arena lights dimmed once more. And this time, no one laughed. Because whatever they had sold for 3 credits was awake. The bolt didn't just miss. It curved. Midair. Like space itself refused to let it strike. The blue discharge twisted sideways and unraveled into harmless sparks before it reached Caleb's chest. The guard holding the shock rifle stared at it in disbelief. I had a clean lock." "You still do," the junior analyst whispered over the comms, voice tight with fear. "It's bending the field around itself." The dragon didn't lunge. Didn't spread its wings fully. It simply stood there, massive, steady, heat radiating outward in controlled waves. Caleb felt the vibration through the soles of his boots. Not chaos. Alignment. The station commander's voice thundered across the arena. Full suppression grid. Now. Ceiling emitters deployed instantly, slamming down a containment lattice of energy around the pit. A dome of crackling blue light sealed overhead. The crowd began to panic. People rushed toward exits. Security shutters slammed down too late. They were all locked inside with it. Caleb didn't look up at the dome. He was watching the dragon's eyes. Both of them now open. Both burning ember gold. "You don't have to hurt anyone," he murmured. The dragon's massive chest expanded. Then. It exhaled upward. Not flame. Not plasma. Heat. Pure thermal pressure. The suppression dome flickered violently. The emitters screamed in overload. Across the station, reactor readouts spiked. "Commander," the analyst gasped, "its output is syncing directly with the main core." "That's impossible. It's a biological organism." "Not just biological," the analyst corrected, voice shaking. "Furnace class designation confirmed. Royal strain." A hush rippled through the command booth. Royal strain. That wasn't arena stock. That wasn't wild caught. That was fleet bonded. Caleb felt the dragon's body shift behind him. Stronger. Larger. Scales that had looked cracked and dull now shimmered faintly beneath soot and scar. The ember glow intensified along its spine. Membranes in its torn wing edges knitted further, sealing fractures with threads of light. The commander swallowed hard. How did that end up in an auction pit? The answer came quietly from the analyst. Because someone stripped its handler. The words hung in the air. Dragons of that class didn't simply obey. They bonded. And when the bond broke violently, they shut down. Caleb finally understood what he had seen the moment he stepped into the pit. It hadn't been dying. It had been grieving. Below them, the dragon lifted one foreleg. The last remaining chain snapped without visible effort. Not from brute strength. From structural failure. The metal simply couldn't withstand the pressure building within. The suppression dome crackled harder. Caleb took a single step forward. He placed himself between the dragon and the ring of armed guards. "Lower your weapons," he said calmly. No one listened. A heavy pulse cannon powered up from the far side of the arena. The dragon's eye shifted. Locked onto it. Caleb felt the change instantly. The temperature climbed another degree. Then another. The pulse cannon fired. The blast roared across the pit. And stopped. Halfway. The air shimmered. Space folded subtly. The energy packet compressed, slowed, then dispersed into glowing fragments that rained harmlessly to the floor. The arena floor beneath the dragon glowed faintly red, but did not melt. The crowd fell completely silent. The dragon stepped forward once. The deck plating groaned under its weight. And then, it roared. Not the awakening rumble from before. Not the controlled harmonic. This was declaration. The sound blasted upward, shaking support beams and rattling observation glass. The suppression dome shattered into cascading sparks. Above, lights burst in rows. Across the station, alarms blared. Docked ships lost power momentarily. In the command booth, every monitor filled with one repeating message. Core override authority detected. The commander's hands trembled. "It's accessing our reactor." "No," the analyst whispered again, staring at the stabilized readouts. "It's correcting it." The reactor output leveled perfectly. Fluctuations that had plagued the station for months vanished in seconds. Energy flow smoothed across all sectors. A failing coolant cycle in the lower decks recalibrated automatically. The dragon wasn't attacking the station. It was optimizing it. Caleb looked up slowly. "You've been bleeding power for months," he said quietly. The commander stared at him through the holofeed. "How would you know that?" "I'm a mechanic." And mechanics listen to systems. The dragon lowered its massive head beside Caleb again. Not shielding him this time. Standing with him. Its body now radiated controlled heat like a living reactor core. The ember glow along its spine stabilized into a steady burn. The guards began backing away. Weapons lowering one by one. The commander's voice returned, but it lacked authority now. "Seize the handler. The dragon is syndicate property." Caleb's expression hardened slightly. "No," he replied. The dragon's gaze shifted upward toward the command booth. The glass between them vibrated faintly. And then, it bowed. Not to the crowd. Not to the commander. To Caleb. A royal furnace-class dragon. Bowing. In acknowledgement of bond. Every technician in the booth went pale. "Commander," the analyst whispered, "that wasn't submission." The commander swallowed. What was it? Designation. Down in the arena, Caleb finally turned to face the command tower directly. "You measured it by output," he said calmly. "You measured it by yield." The dragon's wings spread halfway, casting an enormous shadow across the pit. "You never measured loyalty." The dragon's eyes burned brighter. Not wild. Not unstable. Focused. Caleb exhaled slowly. And realized something the entire station was only just beginning to understand. He hadn't bought scrap meat. He hadn't rescued a dying beast. He had reactivated something ancient. Something engineered not to destroy, but to choose. And it had chosen him. The commander stepped back from the glass instinctively. Because for the first time since the dragon had entered the arena, it no longer looked broken. It looked complete. And it was no longer alone. The station did not explode. That was the first thing everyone noticed. Nothing burned. Nothing shattered beyond repair. No firestorm tore through the arena. Instead, Everything stabilized. The dragon stood in the center of the pit, wings partially extended, ember glow steady and controlled along its spine. The heat radiating from its body no longer spiked wildly. It hummed. Not like a beast. Like a reactor in perfect balance. Across the station, alarms began shutting off one by one. Sector 4 coolant pressure normalized. Docking array alignment recalibrated. Emergency battery reserves recharged from surge overflow. In the command booth, stunned silence filled the air. The junior analyst stared at his display, knuckles white. "Commander, our main core variance just dropped to 0.02%. "That's impossible," the commander muttered. "It hasn't been below 3% in a year." Below them, Caleb stepped forward slowly, resting his palm against the dragon's shoulder. The scales were no longer cracked and brittle. They were warm. Strong. Alive. "You were compensating for instability," Caleb murmured. The dragon lowered its head slightly in acknowledgement. It hadn't been dying. It had been forced to regulate a failing system while restrained, suppressed, and overdriven. The syndicate hadn't just abused it. They'd used it as a living patch for a crumbling power grid. And when it weakened, they'd sold it. The station commander's expression hardened. "Reroute auxiliary power. Bring the heavy turrets online." Several officers hesitated. "Sir, the dragon is stabilizing the core." "I didn't ask for analysis," the commander snapped. "I asked for compliance." Down in the arena, a low mechanical whine echoed overhead. Caleb looked up. Heavy plasma turrets rotated down from concealed ports in the ceiling. The dragon's eye followed the movement calmly. Not aggressively. Assessing. Caleb exhaled slowly. "They're scared," he said quietly. The dragon's chest expanded. Heat intensified slightly, but still controlled. The first turret fired. A concentrated plasma lance shot downward. The dragon didn't dodge. It inhaled. The plasma bolt struck. And bent. The air warped around its body like a lens. The blast curved sideways and dissipated harmlessly into the suppression grid remains. The grid, already weakened, shattered completely. The second turret fired. Same result. Plasma twisted, redirected, dissolved. The arena floor glowed red beneath the dragon's feet, but never liquefied. Up in the command booth, the analyst stared in disbelief. "It's not absorbing the energy." "Then what is it doing?" the commander demanded. "It's redistributing it. Feeding it back into the grid." As if to prove the point, every flickering light across the station steadied. The docking clamps in Bay 3, offline for weeks, snapped back to operational status. The long-failing shield generator in the outer ring hummed back to life. The dragon exhaled once more. And the heavy turrets powered down automatically. Security officers stepped away from their consoles. The commander felt the shift. Authority wasn't being challenged violently. It was being replaced quietly. Caleb stepped forward again, positioning himself clearly in view of the command tower. "You were about to sacrifice the only thing keeping this station alive," he said evenly. The commander's jaw tightened. "It's an asset." "No," Caleb replied. "It's infrastructure." The dragon lowered its head beside him. Not submissive. Aligned. Across the station, maintenance reports flooded in. Reactor overheating issue resolved. Power drift corrected. Energy bleed sealed. Structural stress in lower deck stabilized. The dragon's presence wasn't destructive. It was corrective. A living regulator. A furnace-class royal strain. Built to stabilize fleet cores during prolonged war campaigns. Someone had stripped it from a fleet bond. Overrode its interface. And forced it to compensate for a failing civilian reactor. Caleb looked up again. "You didn't lose power because it was weak," he said. "You lost power because you broke the thing designed to protect you." The commander stared at the data feed. The numbers didn't lie. The station's performance metrics were higher now than they had ever been. The dragon shifted its stance slightly. Not threatening. But immense. Heat rippled subtly across the arena. The crowd remained frozen in stunned silence. One of the engineers in the booth whispered, "Sir, if it disengages." No one finished the sentence. If the dragon withdrew its stabilizing influence, the reactor would return to critical drift. The station might not survive the next surge. The commander swallowed. "You're saying it's holding us together?" "Yes, sir." Below, Caleb rested both hands against the dragon's scales. "You don't have to stay," he whispered. The dragon's eye focused on him. A faint pulse of warmth spread outward. The station core stabilized further. It wasn't staying because it was trapped. It was staying because it chose to. The commander finally spoke into the arena loudspeakers. "Handler." Caleb looked up. "You will power down the dragon immediately." Caleb tilted his head slightly. "That's not how this works." The dragon's ember glow intensified just a fraction. "Controlled. Disciplined." The commander's voice wavered for the first time. "You've compromised station authority." Caleb shook his head. "No. You compromised it when you tried to butcher your own life support." Silence followed. Then, from somewhere deep within the station, a tremor. Not violent. Structural. The reactor recalibrating fully. The dragon lifted its head high. And released a roar. Not destructive. Not wrathful. Harmonic. The sound vibrated through every corridor, every deck plate, every console. When it faded, the station was quiet. Stable. Balanced. System readouts across the command booth displayed one consistent message. Core efficiency, optimal. The commander leaned back slowly. Defeated, not by force, but by reality. Below, Caleb stood beside the dragon as the last sparks from destroyed suppression systems drifted down like cooling embers. The crowd began to murmur. Not in fear. In realization. 3 credits. That's what they had valued it at. 3 credits for the thing that had just saved them all. Caleb looked up one last time. "You measured strength by destruction," he said calmly. "You should have measured it by what it was holding together." The dragon lowered its head beside him again. And the entire station understood something at the same time. Mercy had not unleashed a monster. It had restored a guardian. And now the station's survival depended on whether that guardian chose to stay. The Galactic Commerce Authority arrived 6 hours later. They came in 3 silver enforcement cruisers, transponders blazing official authority codes across every civilian channel in the sector. By then, the station was quiet. Stable. Alive. No smoke. No wreckage. No bodies. Just a dragon standing calmly in the center of an arena that had once intended to kill it. Caleb hadn't moved far. He stood near the outer maintenance access now, one hand resting against warm scales as engineers cautiously worked around the perimeter, running scans they barely understood. The dragon's ember glow had dimmed to a steady, contained burn. Not weak. Disciplined. Docking clamps locked onto the authority cruisers with perfect alignment, better than the station had managed in years. The commander of the authority boarding team entered the arena floor with a squad behind her. Dark uniform. Silver insignia. No visible fear, but plenty of caution. Her eyes went first to the dragon. Then to the stabilized core readings streaming across her wrist display. Then to Caleb. "Who purchased the asset?" she asked. Caleb raised a hand casually. 3 credits, he said. A few nervous technicians nearby almost laughed, but didn't. The authority commander studied the dragon's energy signature. "Royal Furnace class," she muttered under her breath. "Bond capable." She turned sharply toward the station commander, who had been escorted down under supervision. "You auctioned this." The station commander swallowed. It was non-compliant inventory. Failing. Low yield. The authority commander held up her display. "Your reactor drift was at critical threshold. This dragon was compensating." Silence. "You were using it as a living regulator." The accusation hung heavy in the air. Caleb didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The data spoke. The authority commander stepped closer to the dragon, slowly. The dragon's eye followed her. Not hostile. Measuring. She stopped at a respectful distance. "Bond status?" she asked quietly. The dragon lowered its head slightly toward Caleb. A faint pulse radiated outward from its core, measurable on every scanner in the arena. The commander nodded once. "Confirmed." She turned to Caleb. "You understand what you've done?" "Bought something broken," Caleb replied. "And?" "And didn't break it further." The commander's lips twitched faintly. Behind her, authority officers began issuing rapid directives. Syndicate license suspended. Illegal biological exploitation charges filed. Asset trafficking investigation opened. The station commander tried to protest, but one sharp glance from the authority silenced him. Across the station, public channels updated within minutes. Syndicate operations frozen. Dragon trafficking review initiated. Royal Furnace class reclassification notice issued. Caleb finally looked up at the authority commander. "So what happens now?" She studied him carefully. You could register for military bond recognition. He shook his head. Not a soldier. Corporate infrastructure contract, then. You'd be wealthy in a week. Caleb glanced at the dragon. The dragon glanced back. Calm. Present. Alive. I'm a mechanic, Caleb said simply. The authority commander considered that answer. Then she nodded once. Very well. Bond registry will list you as independent handler. She paused. You're aware that furnace-class dragons do not bond lightly. Caleb gave a small shrug. I knelt. The dragon exhaled softly beside him, warm air rolling outward across the arena floor. Not threatening. Content. The authority commander turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing, she said. If it disengages from the station. Caleb looked at the reactor status feed. Perfect balance. The dragon's influence clearly visible in every stabilized metric. It won't, he said quietly. Why are you so certain? Caleb ran a hand along the dragon's scales. Because it chooses. The commander studied the dragon one last time. Then nodded. Then this station survives because you chose not to be like them. Within the hour, authority cruisers departed. Syndicate banners were stripped from the arena walls. Engineers approached Caleb cautiously. Sir, if the dragon could remain linked for at least another cycle, we could install proper stabilizers. Caleb glanced up at the dragon. The dragon's eye softened slightly. He didn't speak aloud. He didn't command. He simply rested his forehead gently against its scales. A pulse answered. Agreement. Across the station, reactor efficiency ticked upward another fraction. The engineers stared in awe. One of them whispered, You paid 3 credits. Caleb gave a faint smile. Best investment I ever made. Hours later, as the station's systems completed recalibration, the dragon stepped forward to the open docking aperture. Stars shimmered beyond the force field. For a moment, it looked outward. Free. Unrestrained. It could leave. No collars. No chains. No suppressors. Caleb didn't grab it. Didn't call it back. He just stood beside it. After a long, quiet moment, the dragon turned away from the void. And walked back into the station. Choice made. The engineers erupted into relieved cheers. Caleb just exhaled slowly. The dragon lowered its head beside him one final time. Then. It roared. Not loud enough to damage. Not violent. Harmonic. The sound rolled through corridors and decks, through maintenance shafts and control rooms, through the command booth where the former station commander sat in stunned silence. It carried a message no translation software could quite define. Bond acknowledged. Purpose restored. Guardian active. In the weeks that followed, the station became the most stable trade hub in the sector. Authority reports quietly updated galactic infrastructure doctrine. Do not classify furnace-class dragons as combat-only assets. Do not suppress bonded regulators. Never evaluate biological infrastructure by yield alone. But among mechanics and dock workers, the lesson spread more simply. Never underestimate a human who kneels. Caleb stood at the observation window later that night, watching freighters come and go under perfectly balanced power. The dragon settled beside him, ember glow steady and calm. You could have left, Caleb murmured. The dragon's eye reflected starlight. It didn't need to speak. It didn't need to roar. Its presence was answer enough. 3 credits. That was all it had cost to remind the galaxy of something it should have never forgotten. Strength isn't proven by what you destroy. It's proven by what trusts you enough to stand beside you.